Evening.
Hello.
Hello, everyone.
Good evening.
How are you?
Great.
Oh, please do. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. Just checking the audio.
Sounds good.
All good.
Awesome. Tyler, do you want me to share my screen, or are you showing the PDF of the PowerPoint?
You can go ahead and share it if you want. Let me make sure you have access.
Okay.
Okay, you should have access to share now.
Okay. So I was excited to come in person, but this is probably better because I heard there's supposed to be more snow tonight. Okay. Does it look good?
Mayor Durand is just joining now.
I
Yeah,
couldn't see
okay.
anything if you were sharing something.
Okay. Try that.
Good evening, everybody.
Hello.
Good evening.
This is M. I see Jeff, I see Brian, I see John. Did we have any indication from Dean or Craig that they will not be able to be here for the workshop? Are we still expecting them?
Still expecting them as far as we know.
Just give them a second here.
There may be confusion over the login link. So
Give them a minute. There's Craig. Hi, Craig. We're all here except Dean, and we're just going to give him a minute in case he's having any difficulty logging in.
Dean is joining now.
Okay, super. Dean, you look connected to me. Let us know if you can hear okay.
Yes, I'm here.
Great, wonderful. We have great participation from staff and department heads. Thanks to our presenters. We have one item of business tonight. I'll call us to order for the City Council, Wabasha City Council workshop on capital improvement planning for the city of Wabasha. And we have ICS here to give us a presentation, and folks from that organization. We have a full complement of our council members. Everyone's present. We have our chief of police, our public works director, of course, our city administrator, finance officer. Who am I missing? We've got the whole gang here. So we really appreciate your time in this workshop format. We'll let you take it away.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate you all being here. Karen, I'll let you start.
Yes, good evening, everybody. Thank you for taking some time to work through this information with us. We're excited to give you an update from the last time we were here. I'll just go ahead and get started. So ICS and the city of Wabasha, we've been working together for a few months now, talking about your capital improvement planning efforts. And basically the objective is to assist you with your capital improvement planning process and take a look at your facility needs that are existing and maybe what's going to happen in the future, near future, and make a plan for those costs. So a quick agenda for tonight. We'll do a quick recap. We've explained who we are in the past, but just to refresh everyone's memory of who we are and what we do and what our capabilities are and what we can bring for services to your efforts. Some discussions we've had to date, observations. We've done some preliminary walkthroughs of your buildings. We'd like to give you a quick overview of that and then give you some next step items that we see are where we should go from here. So ICS team recap. Primarily our our scope of work is in the Midwest. We are Minnesota based. Our home office is in the metro area, but we do have regional approach throughout the state, North and South Dakota, Wisconsin, and we also have a lot of work that we're developing out in Pennsylvania as well. But to give you an insight about some of our work people that would be on this project, a lot of us are from the South Central, Southeast part of the state. Mike Piper, who is joining me here tonight, I'm excited. Last time we had Dave Bergeron was one of our principals that joined in on the conversation. Mike has been actually very heavily involved with all of the discussions to date. So I'm glad Mike can join us tonight. Bryce Kinnery is a project manager who lives in Medford, Minnesota, and has done a lot of work in southern Minnesota with cities and counties. Todd Wetzel is another project director that we have, also located in South Central, would that be Faribault area? And then my name is Karen Klein, and I reside in Mankato. And my role with the company is to work with a cooperative regional cooperatives across the state, but I also help with project development. So just a quick overview of ICS. We are a full service facility company where we have in-house expertise in a variety of areas to help you with your planning for your facilities, long range planning, any issues you may have with engineering with your mechanical systems, we can handle that as well. We also help you once you have a solid plan in place to help you make your vision come to reality with your building of your facilities, retrofits, if you have anything that needs to be done with your existing facilities and enhancing them in a way that makes sense to your existing needs. If that's the case, we can help you along the way. So we bring our expertise into your each step of the process. We also help you operate your facilities so that they operate as efficiently as possible. We've got a lot of different examples of how we can work with you. And I think our main objective, though, is to create relationships with our customers so that we're part of your team and we help you build what you want to see for your future. So with that in mind, here's some of our relevant experience in southern Minnesota. The city of Owatonna, this is just a quick recap. We've talked about this before, but I just want to remind you of some of the things that we've done. It all usually starts with comprehensive facility planning. We'll come in and at that level and help build a plan. It just seems to be one of those areas that we have, it's a differentiator with our company that we're very skilled in coming up with long-term plans that are realistic, have budgets built with them that are realistic. Sometimes we see issues with existing capital improvement plans where there is a budget in place, but the dollar amounts associated with those budgets are not maybe as close to what the market is. So we keep a finger on all of that pulse for you and like to have long-term relationships with our clients. So City of Owatonna, we're still working with them, a strategic energy project. Steele County, we have comprehensive facility plan is where we started with them as well. And most of our work has been at the detention center with their infrastructure overhaul. And then the City of Grand Rapids, we've done some program management for them for their construction project that they needed a quick turnaround and design for their new fire hall. And then the City of Casson, I'm just going to let Mike Piper take a little bit of, he's been very heavily involved in the City of Casson, and you can explain that one a little bit for us, Mike.
Sure. Actually, maybe that's a good segue. Hi, everybody. I apologize I wasn't able to be here when we presented at the last workshop. My name is Mike Piper. I'm a principal with the firm. Dave, my partner, filled in last time. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to be here. But anyway, pleasure to meet you all, even if virtually. Casson is actually kind of similar. We're actually just now getting underway on design and construction for a new fire hall and community center. But I think where that kind of comes back to the conversation tonight is where we started with them, and actually a lot of these other folks we're working with. It all started with basically developing an initial baseline assessment of where these cities stood, because they didn't really have a good understanding of age and condition of existing facilities and really what kind of the plan needed to be for the future. And that's really where we'd like to focus tonight. You'll see that we'll bring that full circle as we get through the rest of this presentation. And of course, if there's any questions, feel free to raise your hand or ask me a question, but we're going to run through some pretty high level information. As you guys are aware, the last meeting, our request was to introduce ourselves to the council, which is much appreciated. Thank you, Caroline, for organizing that. But then from there, we were going to go do some preliminary site visits to get just a kind of a basic understanding of the kind of facility portfolio that the city owns. So we've got some kind of preliminary information that we could share with you, but also hopefully give you some guidance on where we'd like to take this and why we think that would be the case. So Karen, you can go ahead and forward to the next slide. So again, I think you've probably seen this, but we've been talking, we were introduced, I think actually possibly through your finance director at a conference, but just some initial discussions and the kind of initial discussions were, hey, we might have some aging facilities that maybe need some some potential work, or maybe we don't really know what we don't know at this point. And so we had an introductory meeting dating all the way back to summer. And then of course, that led up to a couple of additional discussions. And then of course, a brief presentation to introduce ourselves a couple of months ago. I think that got put off a month or so just due to busy agendas. But anyway, here we are back to kind of show you what we found and to offer what we'd like to propose to the city as far as action steps moving forward. Let's go to the next one. So we'll just jump right into some of the observations here regarding facilities. And before we get into anything too specific, actually, Tyler, maybe I could ask you a question. I know we sent you the presentation ahead of time. Was this a part of the packet that the board has seen? I just don't want to spend too much time reading through a bunch of stuff if it's not necessary, just for the sake of time.
Yeah, it was attached to the agenda that was sent out.
Okay. I'll assume that some have read it, maybe not all, but there's a little bit more detail in here than we have time to go through, but I just want to make sure that we hit the high points for the sake of time. I know you all have a meeting coming up right after this. So just some basic points on how we typically do this. So as Karen mentioned, when you look back at the ICS plan, build and operate slide, that's kind of our high level mantra of, our company focus on everything that we can do with regard to facilities. But what we really bring to the table is kind of where we're headed tonight. We have a very heavy emphasis on upfront planning and strategic planning for facilities. So not just trying to help identify, where your time and money is best spent, but also how to spend it. And we do that by looking at a number of different metrics in order to help you make those educated decisions. And so a couple of those things that we look at right now that we have the ability to are looking at just, again, a very basic facility summary. We need to get a feel of how things look, just get into the facilities, look at them physically, photo document some of the items. But then we also want to come up with what we believe is a replacement value, meaning not that you're going to tear down and rebuild buildings, of course, but it gives you an idea of what it would take and basically the value of the assets that you have or will have moving into the future so that the council can be educated on where things will be, whether it's now, during your tenure, or even after into future councils. So what this does, it helps us create kind of a baseline metric so that the so that the city council not only has a better ability to make educated decisions, but you also have what we would like to call a justification, because obviously you have constituents that when you're spending any money on a city facility, or whether it's a county or anybody, a local government facility, most of the time constituents are going to say, well, why are we spending money on that? And so going back to the very beginning and developing that baseline plan and having an understanding of where you're at and really where you think your problems are going to be down the road really becomes an important piece of information for you to have. So I guess moving to the next slide, this is just a rough, I apologize, excuse me. These have some estimations in them because there's not a lot of data available on your facilities. What you have is some pretty aging facilities, not too huge, which is nice. You have your facilities in the space that's able to support the functions that you currently have. We don't know about the future because, again, we've only completed a preliminary assessment. But these are the facilities listed on the left that we were able to take a look at. Tony Johnson was super helpful and has accommodated us more than once to get a view of things and also be able to interview him because he's primarily responsible for the upkeep of these facilities. But the bottom line is, if you look at this, we're looking at the cities totaling just a little under 50,000 square feet. Based on our opinions and the cost that it would be to replace them. Again, this is just trying to give us a baseline. We're not anticipating you spending $10.6 million to replace your facilities. We're just saying this is what we believe they are roughly worth to be replaced at this point. So it's not a small number. It's a significant amount of infrastructure and assets that the city really does need to focus on and provide upkeep on. Where we will go from here is providing what we call as a facility condition index, which is really a baseline and a percentage that essentially identifies all of the detailed needs that you're going to have, needs and upkeep that's going to be required within the facilities over a window of time. We typically look at a 10-year period of window, 10-year window period. The reason for that is 10 years is about as good as you can get without calling it a crystal ball guess on when things are going to break. So we think that that's a reasonable window to actually give yourselves a forecast. And then from there, that information can help incorporate items into your capital improvement planning process. So really what we're going to do is look at your facilities and kind of map out by a whole bunch of different categories. So mechanical, electrical, fire and protection systems, security systems, exterior envelope, site, all of the things that are associated with your facilities and the upkeep that it's going to be required to be able to make sure that those facilities are in good working order. Then we'll take the needs and divide that over the estimated replacement value that arrives at a facility condition index. So you'll actually have a percentage for each facility. And when you put them all on that level scale versus their replacement value, the needs versus their replacement value, that'll help you make a decision by putting them all on a level playing field to say, here's where we should maybe spend most of our time. And so that's really one of the things that we identify as a key marker of the next step that we would take. So this is some of the preliminary information that we would use. We won't go through every building right now. There is a slide in here that has a little bit more detailed data from our preliminary assessment. Of course, there's a lot more to come from that. But generally speaking, with your facilities, I don't think it's any secret. Your facilities are aging. Nothing's really brand new, but despite that, they're really in pretty good shape. And that's kind of kudos to the folks that are in charge of maintaining those. It's no secret that every client that's a city or a county that we work with typically has underfunded needs within their facilities, because it's hard to spend money on city facilities when you obviously have constituents looking at it. And so again, that's why we try to look at these things to help tell the story and figure out, really where are things now and what are we going to have to do in order to avoid a larger problem down the road. We were made aware that you guys are currently going through a feasibility study to evaluate the fire hall. This is kind of a broader version of that, which is really what we're looking at. But that might result in something that you need to do coming soon. And so our question would be, how is that looked at? How is that funded? How are you strategically going to make sure that you're doing that and spending that money in the best way possible? And also make sure that what's being proposed is the right budget for that. So facilities, not very large, as you saw on the last table. We think it's about $10.6 million worth of replacement value at this point. They are aging, so there are going to be some needs that need to be identified and probably planned for, but at the same time, very well maintained, given common budget constraints that pretty much everybody faces. And then just in general, when you have aging facilities like this, if you're not going to map out and say, hey, we're going to spend 100 or 200 or whatever the number is on an annual basis with regards to upkeep in facilities, it's very common that deferred maintenance pile continues to get kicked down the road, and it builds up over time to the point where you may have to make a decision to build a new facility or modify a facility so that it can be accommodating for city use or for community use or whatever it may be. This is not uncommon. This is what we see, and it's on a preliminary level, kind of what we're seeing today, that you've got some deferred maintenance accumulating just simply because it's hard to go out and spend money on city facilities. From a different standpoint, just in talking with staff, you do have some size limitations in some of your buildings. I think the fire hall is the most notable one. Your city hall and council chambers, it works for now, of course, and I'm certainly not, I don't know if it's the opinion of anybody on the council, but there are some issues with that as far as security, and you're right on the outside window, and there's just some size limitations there. Just certain things. So it's not just saying, hey, you've got an old boiler, an old piece of mechanical equipment, or a roof that needs to be replaced. We really want to take into account, are these really suitable for the needs of the city? So those are the things that we really take into account when we go into this. And then there wasn't a lot of talk about this, but we really like to get jacked up about building for the future. I know there's been proposed developments in the past down there. I mean, you're on a beautiful river setting. Are there things that we can do to help facilitate that? And I think that's quite a ways down the road. We are doing some stuff like that, where we're bringing public-private partnerships to light and bringing developers in to work with the cities and figuring out how we could work together to get bigger projects done. That's something that I think could be down the road. I don't think it's for today, but those are the things that we saw just from a general standpoint when we were meeting with staff and walking through the city. So I won't go through this by any stretch because I'm sure no one's able to read it. But we did want to just give you a highlight. This is a summary of the facilities that we looked at and also spoke about. And this is a mix of just observations that we saw regarding obvious deferred maintenance needs, things that are going to need to be replaced, things that should be, budgeted for, but also things like, as we mentioned, it potentially is too small for the need, or potentially the location isn't ideal. So these are more expert opinions that we would provide back to you guys. So I won't spend time on it today just for the sake of time, but we would certainly encourage you to go through and take a look at that. That's just a snapshot of what we would end up coming back with in a much more detailed fashion, and hopefully a better mapped out solution. So it's not just a random kind of list like you're seeing here. This is basically our notes as we walk through the facilities. So. And then I mentioned this earlier, I don't want to gloss over this. I think this is probably where we get to. But again, one of the things that ICS really focuses on is upfront planning, heavy upfront planning, to figure out, hey, not only what are your needs, but how are we going to help pay for these things? And so I think you saw probably back on or I think Karen actually mentioned it, the Steele County is a good example of this. They had a huge need in their detention center. It was a $4.5 million problem with their HVAC system that never worked right. And they didn't have a way to pay for it. And we had to figure out a way to get kind of creative to help offset any kind of additional tax burden that they would be putting on their constituents to minimize their tax levy increase. And so we did a number of things like leveraging energy and operational savings. So for example, the system that we put in that jail, and I'm just providing this as an example, that system was going to save them around $80,000 to $90,000 a year in operating costs just from energy and operational cost reductions. Well, we went ahead and mapped that out and said, let's leverage that savings on an annual basis against a finance payment so that we can make this as net neutral as possible. Not saying that's the solution with you guys, but we're saying we like to look at all possible solutions. And these are just a few of them. We've, like, as I mentioned, we've gotten involved in a lot of public-private partnerships recently where we can bring private money to the table. Looking at just your expiring debt service, if you happen to have any, things as simple as going after and maximizing rebates from the energy efficiency companies if we're happening to do things with mechanical and infrastructure systems. So we really do take a broad look at all of these things, and that's really where we got our start, and that's, I think, why we've gotten to the point of success that we are today. So I don't want to gloss over the fact that I think this becomes a very important part of the planning process, but before we get to that, we really need to establish that baseline of your facility information. So I think wrapping up, we're kind of getting to the point where we'd like to tell you what we'd like to propose to you as a council. We really take some pride in, again, doing that upfront step to make sure that we understand what we're proposing to you, but also do it in the most efficient way possible. So I think the next slide actually kind of outlines an overall or an overall summary of where we'd like to start and where we'd like to go based on our discussions to date and our site visits. So over there on the left, you'll see facility condition assessment. That's what I've pretty much talked about most of tonight. I'll come back to that. That's really the first strategic step in helping you get your arms around your facility portfolio and your needs and what they're going to be over the next handful of years or 10 years, as I mentioned. That's where we'd like to start, and that's what we will be proposing to you tonight. Second, are there current project needs that you need help with? Again, you have a history of managing projects. It sounds like mostly in-house. I think Tony is kind of your in-house go-to project manager guy, is what it sounds like. But if you were to build a new building, or if you're to do a renovation, or if you're to do any kind of a project, is there a fit and something that it would be more efficient for a group like us to take on? Doesn't mean we certainly don't work on all of our clients' projects. We'd like to establish where we can leverage the appropriate resources. And so if that's something that we can help you with, that's great. Obviously we're not there yet. And then, of course, as I alluded to earlier, if there's new options or ideas that we can bring to the table after we've established ourselves as a trusting partner for the city, then we'd love to be able to offer those ideas up to you, such as helping to bring in new developments or such things like that in public-private partnerships. But again, back to what we're proposing tonight, we really need to focus on doing this facility condition assessment, which again is a deep dive on the facilities that you have that we've identified here and any others that we weren't able to look at. I don't think we've missed anything. But what we'd like to do is really go through each of those facilities and utilize, we actually have a proprietary building planning software that we've developed in-house. It's all categorized by major categories and then subcategories and by a 10-year window. And we put budgets in and descriptions of each of those projects. It actually becomes a very useful tool for your facility management group, or in this case, Tony, to really map out and kind of help manage what those projects are, and then help you incorporate those needs into your capital improvement plan. Of course, not everything happens every year, but it still gives you a broad picture of where things need to go. And so I think, Karen, if you might switch to the next slide. Okay, that's what I thought. You can go back. I'm sorry. I wasn't sure if we had included it yet or not. So I will just tell you, we did assemble a proposal that was sent over to Administrator Gregerson earlier this afternoon, I believe. That facility condition assessment, we generally like to do that in 3-year periods. What that means is, because we go in and we'll spend the first year really doing a deep dive and developing, gathering all the information and assembling a really nice report and putting it in the online database for you, so that you not only have access to it, but you can export it and utilize it at things like council meetings or public engagement sessions or whatever you need. And that's kind of the heavy lift. And then what we like to do is help you keep that updated for a couple of years, because you are going to establish some of those projects. You are going to accomplish getting some of those projects done. Others you may not. But the thing is, time moves on and things get older. Things happen and you have to incorporate new projects. And so doing a regular update for a couple of years is a typical thing. So that's what we'd like to propose. I don't think it's in here because we didn't have this completed at the time we sent this over to Tyler, but the cost for doing a 3-year facility condition assessment, essentially it's doing the initial deep dive and then doing updates for 2 years after that, is a total of $9,000. The initial deep dive would be about $6,000. And then to keep that updated and doing in-person meetings with you and helping Tony and whomever on the staff we would need to have help us would be an additional $1,500 per year. Along with that, of course, if we see or can make observations along the way, we certainly will. But the direction that we got from staff and the direction that we also came to the conclusion on was that it seems like you guys could really utilize some outside help and kind of mapping out where the facilities are and where you're going to be in the future. So that's what we'd like to start with, and that's what we're proposing today. So I barely cleared like 20 minutes. So hopefully that was enough. And I know there may or may not be questions, but happy to answer any. But we really appreciate your consideration. And thank you, staff and Administrator Gregerson and Tyler for all of your time so far. We appreciate it. And thanks for the
Yes, thank
opportunity
you.
to come speak to council.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Karen. We really appreciate this as well. We don't have a lot of time for questions. I'm sure council will like to digest this. Probably everybody got to look at it, but hearing your overview is always very helpful. I just want to say thanks for being here. I'm having a really unstable internet connection, so I didn't want to not say thanks, but certainly welcome questions from council if there are any. So I wasn't turning my video off to go let my dog out of the house. It was just seemed to improve my connection. So thank you. Really appreciate your time tonight.
We call that second screening in internal meetings because everybody's always looking at another screen, like pretending to pay
such an easy to review report. And I think we'll all go press. Yeah, I'm not checking my email. I'm right here. I'm just having trouble staying connected.
We'll probably put this
So
on
for the purposes of our 7 o'clock meeting. I'm going to change locations. I'm just thinking. Jeff, did you have a question? That I heard somebody.
It's Tony, Mayor. We'll
Thanks,
probably put this on the next council meeting for discussion, I think is what the plan is.
That sounds good.
Okay.
And I'm sure that ICS is open to
I have a question. Can you hear me?
questions in the interim if
Yes, sir.
needed. So if you have those, get those to Caroline in the interim. Yes, go ahead.
I have a question, and I'm looking at my screen right now at the presentation on my end.
Go ahead, Dean.
I don't see that you guys looked at the buildings out of the utilities, sewage plant and stuff.
You are correct. We did not. We will focus on that if that becomes, if we do end up engaging with you. The reason we didn't was just basically a lack of time. And most of the stuff out there with utilities is really more process driven. We can certainly get into that, but on the preliminary level, we decided to focus really on the facilities themselves, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I was just wondering why, and I guess you answered that. It is a fairly newer building, so, but
Sure.
I was just curious why. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. Thank you for the question.
Mr. Mayor, council member, or Madam
Any
Mayor,
other-
excuse
Hi,
me,
Brian.
council member, sorry.
That's okay. I'm glad to see you on.
I would just comment to the wastewater plant facility is going to be looked at independently as a part of the facility plan that we're doing. So we'll be doing a full analysis of that facility as a part of the facility planning process as well. So there'll be some overlap there. independent of this.
It's good to know.
Mike, I think you were gonna respond. Go right ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just saying, I think that's good to know. And we'd probably still take a look at it. It's not really going to impact our time on site just because it's not, we're not looking at 30 facilities. It's stuff that we can get done in a couple of days. It's not going to change our time on site much. And actually this came up with discussion with the fire hall. I know that you guys have a feasibility study underway.
Well, I'm gonna
We're
wrap
still
this
going
up.
to look at that and do a comparison. And so that way you've got at least a couple of pieces of information to look at. And so, it wouldn't be a bad thing anyway to have those, but I certainly appreciate and understand what you're saying. If there's another whole feasibility study coming on and you wanted us to say, hey, forget about it, we can do that too. We're pretty flexible and pride ourselves on such. So.
Well, as you know, we've got a council meeting to start here on the hour, and there may be members of the public kind of confused if we don't join them. So we'll do that now. So we'll close out our workshop. Thanks so much, ICS, for joining us. And council, I believe it's the same link. If that's not correct, Caroline, please let.
It's the same one, so no one has to
No,
go anywhere.
same
We
link
just have
for
to
council.
unshare that screen.
Okay, if I disappear for a second, because I'm going to get on.
And Karen, if you're the one sharing, you need to make sure that you can
try to
unshare
get
that
on a more
and
stable
we'll
connection. I'll
let
be right
them
there.
move on. So
Thanks, everybody.
thank you very much. Appreciate your time, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Carolyn, do we need to adjourn the special workshop before we call to order the regular meeting?
Probably, yeah. Do you want to do that, Brian?
Yeah, I'll just make a motion to adjourn our workshop.
Second that motion.
Second from, I think, Dean, I heard first. Any discussion? All in favor? We can take a roll.
Friedmeier,
Yes.
Walrick,
Yes.
Moyer,
Yes.
Sella,
Yes.
Woodley,
Yes.
Falcom,
Yes.
Durant. Mayor Durant, we were just taking a roll call to adjourn the workshop.
Hi, Mayor. We adjourned the workshop.
Tyler, can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
Yes.
we adjourned the workshop. We just took a roll. You were up to adjourn the
Wonderful.
workshop.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we've got completed roll. Great. And
If
everybody,
you give a yes, then we'd be complete.
yes, I'm here. Okay, thanks for everybody participating in the workshop. For anybody who was awaiting council's meeting to start, sorry about that. We had a little transition from a capital improvements workshop. So we will call to order tonight's January 4th meeting of the Wabasha City Council. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
Indivisible.
with liberty and justice for all.
justice for all. Thanks, everybody. Happy New Year. Do we have any guest speakers this evening, Caroline? I'm not aware of anybody, but I should check with you. Okay. Public comment. We have a short time to hear from the public on any matter that you'd like to put before council, whether or not it's on the agenda. If you've never done that before, all you need to do is unmute yourself, which is a little microphone shaped icon in the lower left of your screen. If you move your mouse around, it will appear. So if you click it and it becomes green, then you can speak to council. If you would just kindly state your name and residence for the record, and then go ahead and if you can keep your comments to about 2 minutes, we'd be happy to hear from you. Do we have any public comment? I'm not seeing anybody unmute. If you can't get your mute to work and you want to start your video and wave, you can do that as well. Okay. All right, it doesn't look like we have any public comment. As for changes to the agenda, I know there's a couple that are not really changes to what you see published here before you, but they were added. And so I just want to bring your attention to them in case you reviewed your agenda really early. One is the Finchy building update. And that is, where do we have that? That is what we call the vacant lot next at 137 Pembroke. It's under general business 4. So there's an update on that building since the agenda was published. We also have need to form an ad hoc personnel committee. If you have not been abreast of this issue, the Criminal Justice Center lease terms by Wabasha County include a provision to add additional requirements of us as a lessee for our police department. And because of the federal mandate for vaccination of employers with more than 100 employees, the county is deliberating with the city on how to achieve that, given that our city does not have 100 employees, but our police force is located within this county facility. So that will also be under general business item 5. Any other changes to the agenda? I would like, on behalf of Darren's attendance, to be able to pop committee reports ahead of my or Caroline's presentation. I know Darren has a scheduling conflict. If that's okay with everyone, we'll do, at the very least, we'll do Wabasha Fire and EMS report at that time. It probably makes sense just to do everybody at that time, if that's okay. Any other changes or additions?
I have a question on the minutes when that comes up.
Okay, great, Dean. So before the consent agenda, we'll address a question. Please interrupt me and remind me, Dean, if I forget.
Will do.
Okay, thanks. All right, hearing no additional changes or additions, Darren, take it away. We know you've got another conflict.
Yeah, can everybody hear me?
Hear you fine.
All right. All you want to do is give you the 2021 report, I guess, let everybody know that there's a few changes that came about come January, but last year we ran 110 plus runs, which gives us about 2 a week. That's another big record from last year, but it shows how busy we really are. We had no pension contribution from the city given to our pension this year, which is the first time that's happened in 10 years. So that shows our investments are doing well. The committee that's together to help with that, along with Edward Jones, shows that they're doing what they need to do on that part too. One of the changes on January was, of course, the fire sirens now are shut off. They will be used for first Wednesday of the month at noon, and of course for severe weather. Otherwise, the fire sirens will no longer be activated. it does allow us to activate it if we need to. So if something big would go down, if we would have a big fire, like what I call an all call, which means I need everybody on board, then we would probably activate the sirens at that time. So other than that, you probably won't hear them anymore. And we'll see how that went countywide due January 1st. And we were kind of one of the last counties in the state that kind of, we're still hanging on to their sirens. So we're trying something new. I know I got some feedback from the public and a lot of people don't like it. I don't like change, but it's, we definitely can make something like that. It's gotta be. So, with that, I don't really have much else. I just wanted to give you a quick end of the year report, and we got our new air compressor in. We haven't got it all put together yet, but start working on that. I'm pretty excited about that. Our old compressor is pretty, when I look at this one compared to that one, surprised what 25 years can do. But other than that, I don't have much else. I just wanted to get on there and do this.
Thank you, Darren. Thanks for a very, safe year. Thanks for everything from the whole department. We really appreciate it.
All right. You guys have a good night.
Good night. All right, I'm just going to keep the committee reports going so I don't somehow forget to do that, because that would be very much like me. I'll start with Brian with utilities. I know you guys had a short meeting yesterday.
Yeah, we actually didn't have a quorum, so we weren't able to have our meeting. So we're just gonna push it down the line till next time.
Sounds good. I know Brian and I were in communication. One of the things that's come onto my radar in my whole tenure, but also for much more in the last 6 months, is the notion that infrastructure for electric vehicle charging is desired. Obviously, as these vehicles become more prevalent and the pickup and other vehicle types become more available, it will become increasingly likely that we'll see those vehicles in our communities. That right now it's a very small percentage of Americans that drive them, but all the drivers look like they're moving toward positive. I think the F-150 took like 200,000 orders and then just stopped taking orders on it. So the demand is high, consumer interest is there. And the good news is we expect there to be infrastructure monies, especially related to rural infrastructure and making sure there's equity and people don't have to have range anxiety about that. So I just put it in Brian and I had talked about it earlier, and I said, would you tee that up for utilities? So since they didn't have a meeting, that can be something that they discuss in the February meeting. But if you hear that from constituents, please let me know. I know that we don't know where the funding is going to go. Our DOT contacts have indicated as such, at least at this early juncture. But I'm almost certain we will see some level of funding opportunities. Thanks for that utilities update. John, I know you weren't able to be at Port Authority. I don't know if you want to defer to Caroline and Craig.
Yeah, I would. Caroline, Craig, Tyler, if they can, any input would be great. Otherwise, I know that we're on the agenda with respect to the strategic plan. So
right, that's the highlight, right?
Yep.
So maybe you want to
I'll just draw everyone's attention to the fact that the strategic plan for the Port Authority has been uploaded and would be discussed in February. And if anybody has any comments or feedback, then we would just ask that you provide that feedback and it could be incorporated in February. And then I think, John, is the Port Authority looking for a vote on it in February by council, or just that they've heard about it?
Well, an endorsement of some sort.
Yeah. Okay.
We would be voting on, but yes, certainly at minimum endorsement, if not a vote of support.
Okay. So it's there for your review. And I think it's come out of a desire of just kind of what does the Port Authority do? How are we going to measure progress with now hiring CETA? So.
Yeah.
If I can just interject. So this has been a work in progress for a number of years. And we've done a lot of tabletop discussion with respect to this, and bringing CETA on, bringing Kathy on with Caroline and Tyler's help has really helped us get to this point. This is this document is going to help guide us, just like the comp plan does, just like our zoning code does. So I think it's really important. And so any comment on it would be welcomed.
Craig, did you want to add anything, or Tyler? Okay. I was able to
Glad
participate.
that, Kathy with CETA, we had a good article on the front page of the Wabasha paper that outlines some small business relief opportunities or support
Yeah.
opportunities. So
Yeah, wonderful
glad you can
coverage.
check it out if you haven't seen it.
Wonderful coverage. That was not today's or this week's, but the prior week, right on the top of the front page. That's in my message. I'm really grateful for that, and grateful for the strategic plan. And I think it was pointed out that there's a lot of detail in it, and there is, but I thought it was helpful when Caroline and Kathy outlined that one of the reasons for that detail is that Kathy is our interim staff person. And so if she's not with us long-term, it provides sufficient detail that a future staff to Port Authority can take this plan and make it actionable, continue to make it actionable. So I think if it feels like a lot, just understand that that was intentional, but any bit of feedback, whether it's large scale, 10,000 feet or very specific recommendation for additions to that, I think would be appreciated. Okay. Tim, Planning Commission.
Yeah, so we met on the December 14th. The only item we talked about was short-term rental discussions. So this is more the VRBOs, Airbnbs, and how it kind of fits in with Wabasha and some of our ordinances. And really, how does it make a kind of a level playing field along with some of the bed and breakfasts in town, some of the motels, hotels, and so on. So a lot of discussion on that. I think planning will bring this forward to Port Authority to have a little further discussion on that and a little bit kind of see where we want to head. I know some of the discussions were more around, some of the issues were more around enforcement of some of the lodging fees and stuff. But I think in January, we'll bring it forward to the Port Authority. We'll probably bring it back to planning. I'm guessing probably in February after the Port Authority. And then the only other item would be term limits per our consent agenda. I think there's one vacancy in for 2022. So just to point that out.
Thank you for that. Yeah, anybody you can think of who would be a good addition to planning. It's a very important group and does good work. So I think it's one of those where I hope Planning Commission feels like when they meet that it's very much worth their time. So that'd be great to have someone new or someone who served prior and wants to revisit that group. Jeff, anything further? Otherwise, I'll move on to Parks. Good. Okay. Tony and Dean, Parks, and then I guess Streets also, Tony.
Good evening, everyone. We did not have a meeting for either Street Commission or Parks. Looking probably in January to get back on track with Parks. Having a meeting. I guess the only thing I'd say is we might have to plow a little bit tonight, probably be in at 4 o'clock. Somewhat blizzard conditions, but 2 inches of snow. So I don't really know what's going to happen yet, but just give the public a heads up. That's all I got.
Very good. Dean, anything you want to add? I think without a meeting, there's probably not a lot, but anything you wish to comment on with regards to Parks?
No.
Okay, great. All right. And then certainly, Joe, if you want to give us a police update, we'd welcome that. We don't, it's not on the agenda, but if you need our time, we would happily take one. And Bev is on with the library as well.
No, I didn't have anything prepared, but I was just looking for end of the year numbers here. And I believe this is the highest year since I've been here for call load. We ended the year at 4,908 calls. So that's on the high end. As opposed to like last year, we were just over 4,000.
Wow, that's a big difference. All right, thank you, Joe. We appreciate everybody's service. Thank you so much. Bev, anything you'd like to share from the library, from your staff or board?
No, everything is going well. Few staff illnesses, but we're getting the hours covered, and so everything's good. We got programs coming up in January and February that we're looking forward to.
Wonderful. I was glad to see the, I suppose it's a UV light in Caroline's administrator update. She mentioned there's a UV light available to the library as we trudge through the darkness. I keep thinking it's getting a little later, although I think it's pretty much the same as December 21st. It's like 3 seconds different, but I might have to come over just to see you guys.
Yeah.
A little full spectrum light.
Yeah.
Great. All right, anything else for updates? Any other updates just from members of the council or good news? All right, well, I am not a Christmas card person. I never get that accomplished. I'm more of a New Year's kind of let's turn the page kind of a person, but I also don't assume that every time we enter January that everything's going to be easier and fresh and, you know, that nothing will be challenging and difficult. But when I think about what's been challenging and difficult in the last year, I almost always realize we have so much to be grateful for. And just apologies, I'm going to read a little bit because I don't want to forget some of these highlights. A lot has happened in 2021. We hired a very enthusiastic new administrator who's leveraged the talent and motivation of our staff to continue to not only weather all these crazy changes related to a pandemic, but also taking all of council's stated priorities by the horns and getting everybody together to work on those initiatives. None of those are undaunting. I think when we were hiring an administrator, we knew we had big priorities for that person to tackle. And Caroline, thank you so much for just jumping right into the deep end, and everybody else too. And so we've had continuity in our services and we've retained excellent staff. Thank you to everybody. Thank you to our department heads for your leadership, and to every member of staff for ensuring that the work of the city is effective and efficient and accessible and serves the community equitably. I'm very grateful to you all as individuals, and I'm super happy about how well everybody works together. It's so important and we really appreciate it. Do not take that for granted at all. I'm so happy for everyone's safety and very grateful because we've had a really low number of deaths related to the pandemic in the city and in the county. And that's, of course, a lot of effort beyond the city, but still worth noting that we didn't know where we were going to be a year ago. And of course, very, very grateful and mindful of this with Darren and the chief's reports that we've had safety of our police and our EMS, because it's been a very, very busy year for those individuals and some very difficult responses that they've had to face. So we're really very, very, very grateful for that. We've had many committed, longstanding and new members of boards and commissions. Every time I see new people join, I get so excited. When I see application, it's always somebody who I think will make a great addition. And of course, I'm always astonished at how many people are willing to serve for very long periods of time on our boards and commissions and task forces. So thanks everybody for your service. And thank you to the staff who staff those boards and commissions, because without your leadership, they wouldn't get anything done. I know from having been on a commission that that's true. For the following initiatives, which have come to mind as highlights, this is not everything, but just because I know these things have been desired for a long time and now they're actually in progress, which is real progress is something to be celebrated. And in some cases, these goals have been achieved. We have a bonding request in and a successful tour related to the Highway 60 reroute and the athletic field relocation and the barge terminal. That was a wonderful thing to celebrate in 2021. We have a Wabasha Port Authority with an experienced economic development staff member who's helped draft a strategic plan and has business assistance programs for local businesses that are available now. So make sure, if you haven't seen the one pager that staff put together, it's really helpful. It puts together not only city programs, but also Semtra and other opportunities that might help businesses leverage their resources to the best service of their business. We have a Bird City designation. Thank you to Nancy Falcom. She was spearheaded this, very, very single-handedly, but I know she works with a lot of volunteers who made this a reality. So the leadership of Nancy and everyone else involved, thank you. We've initiated a process toward a charter commission. While we know this is going to be time consuming and, it's not exactly clear how we get there, we have made first steps. And I think we have some good consensus on how we've moved that forward. And we have a task force that's developing a comprehensive evaluation of our ambulance service operations. This is very needed for this critical and important service. And we have increasingly a robust park plan that envisions our park resources for the community's future. I don't take for granted the assets that we have in parks, but also the renewed interest in parks in a small community. I think it's easy for parks just to remain sort of as they are, but I know I can feel that there are lots of people who are interested in making our parks useful now and in the future. And that's so exciting. And we have a concerted effort to address housing and childcare in our community. And these are issues that remain exceptionally challenging, but they're central to our success. It's very easy when people bring good ideas or bad ideas or, just any number of ideas to us and to our staff, and to get to lose our focus. But I know that those issues of childcare and housing are going to be so tantamount. And so I really appreciate the renewed attention to those issues and kind of making a plan for progress. And Caroline might choose to say something about the Housing Institute. I'll let her update you on that. So none of these things have been easy. They're all important, and many things are not included in this list of highlights, but thank you to everybody. Thank you to council for serving with me, and to all your participation with all the volunteers and community stakeholders, and of course, staff and leadership for making these things happen. That is all from me. Sorry to keep it, I'm trying to keep it short, but it's in a year in review. I really don't want to miss some of the major highlights, and there have been many. So with that, we would have our administrator report.
Okay, I am going to, sometimes it's easier to just share my screen here. But just key goals and progress, I think you mentioned them. I'm just trying to track them. I think the big news for the Highway 60 and athletic field plan is that there was a donor in the community interested in seeing some tennis courts, Jeff/pickleball courts. I don't know how they're gonna meld together, but they've made a $50,000 donation to the Wabasha Kellogg Foundation at the end of the year, designated for that. So we have Bolton and Mink working on a concept of maybe starting with the tennis courts with this donation and sort of a phase one, knowing that the rest of the athletic field would be moved there. So we're working through those concepts. And the DOT got back to me. And they don't yet have all the details of the infrastructure bill, but I think we may have mentioned this. Representative Angie Craig's office wrote a letter to Governor Walz's office saying that while this could not be funded under the federal legislation, they're hoping Governor Walz supports projects like this one, and this one was named. And I met with our attorneys today, and we're working on terms of negotiation with the Coners and starting to put together the pieces of the legal agreements to take the barge terminal project. Unfortunately, we did learn, because I wrote this before January, that we did not receive the federal funding award, which was very disappointing, but we've learned that there's more funding available for it next year. So I think we're hoping, that we could pursue that again next year. And then with the ambulance task force, we're kind of down to, I'm trying to do some in-depth data gathering on options in terms of the ambulance service. And I think we've narrowed it down to one of the main questions is whether or not to hire an ambulance director. So I think everything else has been covered or is on the agenda. Thank you. Oh, one more thing on the short-term rental item. I just wanted to say that I felt that we also just maybe need a smaller internal meeting with Chamber of Commerce, for example, with Jeff, with M. This is definitely a big topic. For me, it's almost a project of its own. And if to pursue this, in my opinion, we'd have to figure out how this lines up with our priorities, because I think it's going to take, potentially time, resources to really dig into this. But so I'm hoping to also organize an internal meeting to kind of understand what are the questions we should be asking ourselves on this question.
Yes, thanks for mentioning that. I neglected to acknowledge that when that came up in planning. So that's good. I think that's a good first step or next step. Planning took the first step. So thank you. All right. So Dean wanted to, okay, so just again, remember that strategic plan for the Port Authority is there. So if you're taking notes of anything to follow up on, please do review that prior to our February meeting. Actually, it would be best probably if it's prior to the Port Authority's meeting, which is in 2 weeks, and submit any comments to staff. It's good work, so it's worth reviewing. So for our consent agenda, Dean had questions about the minutes. Go ahead, Dean.
Yeah, I had a question on 10-3, vacant lot 137 Pembroke. We had a couple of discussion items on there, which they're there. The one we're missing is the discussion on whether we can sell property to adjacent landowners, and we're going to look into that. And I don't see that in the minutes. And I would like that added. I believe my response was we can, because we have a history of doing that. But I know we had directed Carolyn to look into that. So I would just like that added to that.
Sure. So with that addition to the minutes, any other comments about the consent agenda? Otherwise, I'll just run through quickly what's included. Oh, here's my agenda. Okay, so also in the consent agenda were the January warrants, the 2022 appointments and annual designations. And I'm sorry, I don't want to, this is really as an appreciation for those that serve. I know you guys have read this document, but I just want to say for parks, we would have, excuse me, I'm starting at the wrong side of the list. To the Civil Service Committee, Dan Lazinski would be willing again to serve till 2024. To the Port Authority, Mary Fleechuk would be willing again to serve till 2027. I know that we don't have the vacancy filled, or we don't have an applicant for HPC, but the Heritage Preservation Commission has 2 interested new members. So that's great news. We'll probably hear from them in February. To Streets, Jay Jewson and James Mathias are also willing to serve until 2023. To the Library, Joe Solentich and Ann Miller willing to serve till 2024. To the Parks Commission, Darren Sheely, Michael Anderson, and Gary Sikora willing to serve till 2024. To the Planning Commission, Sharon Burke willing to serve until 2024. And then a couple folks who've served and completed their terms and won't be able to serve again, but we thank them, Bruce Wilds to the Heritage Preservation Commission and Chris Cruz to the Planning Commission. So that's the appointments and annual designations. We have the MnDOT limited use permit for highway beautification, the liquor and gambling applications. I think it was for the baseball association, for their golf course fundraiser, and St. Felix for a temporary liquor license for Catholic Schools Week kickoff dinner. And then, oh shoot, I knew I was going to do that. My agenda is a little sluggish. And then the fee schedule, which has been updated and changes highlighted. With that consent agenda and addition to the minutes, do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Is there a liquor license for the Fresh Walk on the consent as well?
Oh yes, I just didn't read it. Yes, there is. I just missed it because I'm so reluctant to go in and out of those because they're sluggish for me tonight, and I don't know why. There absolutely was. Just to make sure we got it. Yes, Fresh Walk for an on sale and Sunday sales liquor license running from 2/1 to 6/30 at a prorated fee, at which point they would do a full 12 year license in July. So yeah, with that, thank you, Jess. I think I heard a motion to approve. I think it was Tim. Tim, is that right?
Correct.
Do we have a second?
No second, Friedmeier.
We have a second from John. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll have a roll vote.
Malcolm,
Yes.
Woodley,
Yes.
Sella, Sella.
Yes.
Moyer,
Yes.
Walrick,
Yes.
Friedmeier,
Yes.
Durand.
Yes. Great, thank you, everybody. So I'm sorry, Carolyn, I bumped you into the updates and now I see you had yourself as general business 1. Do you have anything additional
No.
to add? Okay,
No,
thank
it's
you.
just it never lands in the right place.
That's okay. I'm sorry. Habits die hard, so.
Mayor Durand, do we
Yes,
need to-
please.
Do we need to choose a council president?
I believe we do.
Yeah.
As of January 1, Brian does not have to serve in that role if he doesn't want to anymore. Thank you. Let's make that general business 7. Tyler, can you stop the freight train that is my meeting management if we don't pause right there? Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so general business, oh, see, did I say 7? 6, I'm looking at consent. So general business 6. General business 6 will be a nomination of a council president. Okay, so general business 1 we've taken care of. General business 2 is our downtown planning process. And we have Brian with us.
Sorry, I had to find the mute button.
That's okay.
It's elusive at times. I'm going to share my screen here if that's okay. Everybody see this? This is that map that was in your council packet.
Looks
See
good.
this? Okay.
Yep.
Yes.
So to summarize this this item, we wanted to get some feedback and input from council on what types of things you may want to incorporate into the public involvement and planning effort that we'll be going through as a part of the downtown reconstruction project. So for review, we will be starting the public involvement feasibility study planning process for the downtown reconstruction project, which will take place along Pembroke Avenue, Main Street, and Bridge Avenue in 2023. It's planned for construction in 2023. And we want to start the planning process for that as soon as possible this year. As a part of that normal planning process for a reconstruction project, we would have public involvement involving business, property owners, and general citizens of the city to provide input on the proposed improvements. Obviously, there'll be underground utility improvements that folks aren't real interested in, but because this is your downtown core, there will also be some aesthetic improvements, pedestrian improvements, and other things that we want to get public input on. And because we'll have a public involvement process going on, the discussion came up as to whether we should also be looking at a larger area of downtown and talking about visions for the future for other things downtown, since we'll be doing this planning process. Well, I guess I can talk about this one a little bit. Back in 2006, there was this vision process that was gone through in 2006, and there was a document prepared, and that could be used as a basis for some of the discussion that we would start at. But we really wanted to just get council input on what kind of things do you want to look at. Obviously, we'll be looking at the project itself, but we may also want to consider any aesthetic decisions that you make as a part of the project. For example, street lighting, landscaping, benches, any type of streetscaping, hardscaping improvements. Is there an area of downtown that you would want to kind of establish as the area you would want to continue that aesthetic in the future when you do other improvements in the future? So maybe an additional part of downtown, or you would want to carry that aesthetic through. Would you want to carry some of that aesthetic down to Beach Park? So that'd be one part of it. The other part that we heard discussion about was the idea of looking at pedestrian and trail and bike and pedestrian trail connectivity along the riverfront. Right now, the trail kind of ends at Main Street, and then you're kind of out on the street until you get up to the condos, where the trail continues along behind the Eagle Center, and then you're back out kind of on the street on Lawrence Boulevard. So would you want to look at a corridor to continue some planning and future sidewalk and trail improvements to kind of loop back to Hiawatha Drive? We talked a lot about wayfinding signage. That's come up several times during the Eagle Center project and in other discussions when you looked at the parking study several years ago. The idea of that there is a lot of parking downtown, but there isn't very good signage to direct people to where that parking is and how do you get from the parking areas to the points of interest. So do you want to look at wayfinding signage as a part of this public involvement process? And if so, where should those wayfinding signs direct people to and that type of thing? There was also some discussion about access to the river. We know that as a part of the Riverfront Renaissance project, that there'll be some great improvements made with the amphitheater space and the new dockage along the river, but are there opportunities to enhance other areas downtown? And do you want to plan for that kind of thing as a part of this process? Not that you would necessarily construct these other improvements now, but it's an opportunity to get public involvement and plan for those things, since we're talking about the downtown area. So Would you want to look at the property, the MnDOT property under the bridge for potential enhancements, or some of the city-owned property that's located under the bridge as well? This is kind of a Google Street View image. So it's kind of this area under the bridge. Some of this is MnDOT property, and it extends, as it extends west along the river, there's some city-owned property there that has the potential for some redevelopment. So do you want to look at planning for that as well? So we'd like to get your input on that and what you might want to look at as a council as a part of this planning process. And once we get your input, we would come back to you at your February meeting. Obviously, there's a cost to doing some expanded planning. We did include public involvement and typical planning in the estimated costs for the downtown project. But if you want to expand that, there would be some additional costs for that. And depending on what you want to look at, we would come back to you with what those costs would be to do that additional public involvement and planning for these other items at your February meeting, and you can make a decision on what you want to include.
Thank you, Brian. I have a laundry list, even though I'm cautious of, additional costs. I know we want to think comprehensively, but kind of move in a stepwise fashion. So I can comment when others have had a chance. Anybody want to start? I'll cross off what I hear from others.
Yeah, I'll start. This is Craig Fulton. So I think John Friedmeier and I talked at one time about expanding the parking under the bridge, and you had highlighted it on one of your slides, Brian. That area in there has room for additional parking. If we're going to have additional visitors to the Eagle Center, we're going to probably need additional parking. So I would like to know what it might cost to develop that area into an additional parking lot that's under the bridge, that's right adjacent to the what we would used to call Lawrence Boulevard. And another thing I was wondering about is the bump outs on the corners. Do we want bump outs on every corner? So that's something we should take into consideration. Are there any corners where it might be a problem for, we do have semis that come into the downtown area. Might it be a problem for those or other service trucks that come in? And then a third one would be the schedule of construction. Are we going to be able to maintain access to the businesses that are downtown, mainly between the bridge and road? So that's something we should probably take into consideration. Can there be a stage construction or something? I don't think we can just close those streets all summer long. We've got to have some type of access in there. So I'm hoping that you've got some answers for that, and we can talk to you on February.
Yep, I would say that the issues you brought up, the bump outs, the phase construction, the access to business, that would all be stuff that we would already include in the typical project planning. So that wouldn't be, extra type of things that we would be looking at. Those would be typical things that we would look at as a part of the project, and certainly would evaluate as a part of that public involvement and planning process. So parking under the bridge, or how to utilize that space, that city owned and MnDOT owned space under the bridge or near the bridge would be like an extra thing. So.
Yeah, Brian, this is Dean. I'll probably speak later too, but the one thing I want to point out right now is accessibility, and looking at maybe some of the side roads. If you look at Walnut Avenue right now, down by Urban Arrow in the parking lot under the bridge, there's 3 light poles in the middle of a sidewalk, which is poor planning. I would like to see that corrected. Also on Walnut Avenue, there's cut curbs that you can't go up and down in a wheelchair, particularly at the condos there. I showed Tony that earlier this year. So I would like to see us fix some of the problems that aren't in this plan, but are adjacent to this plan.
Okay.
For example, those.
Okay. And you're saying you wouldn't necessarily just want to plan for that. You would want to potentially consider including that in the project.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, right now it makes no sense having a sidewalk with 3 light poles in the center. Or if you're in a wheelchair or scooter, you have to go on the grass.
Yep, I agree.
And 1, 2, 3 cut curbs right around the condos that you can't use.
Yep.
Makes no sense.
Understood.
Thank you, Dean. Anybody else?
A couple questions, if I may. This is John.
Please, John.
So Pembroke, adjacent to the National Eagle Center, Lawrence Boulevard, and how those directions, are being considered, the routing is being considered to be changed. And then the curb cuts or the bump outs and things that are going to help to facilitate that kind of action. Can that be part of this project?
So I wish I had that drawing. I could probably pull it up here if I could find it. But the bump out that's going to occur here to facilitate the rerouting of traffic, that's a part of the Eagle Center or the Riverfront Renaissance project. So those improvements in this area right here to facilitate changing this section of Lawrence Boulevard from a one-way to the east to a one-way to the west. That's included in the project. We'll probably have to work with Tony on signage, here as a part of that, obviously, but those improvements here are part of the Eagle Center project that's being built, well, right now and into next spring and summer. The bump outs and things that we'll be evaluating as a part of the 2023 project, those will take place, up at this intersection here, and we'll be looking at that as a part of the planning process.
Okay. So just so it's coordinated in such a way that either we can get some economy of scale if we can do it all at the same time, or they don't look like 2 separate projects in the end.
Yep. Right. And that's, I think, the point in what we were talking about with the aesthetic. If we pick a style of light pole to put in as a part of the project on Bridge Avenue, Pembroke, and Main Street, we're going to want to make sure that's, if you then do a Second Street project, I don't know, 10 years from now or something like that,
right? Do
you want that same kind of aesthetic, the same style of light pole, the same style of benches, and basically the same aesthetic? You want that to carry through on Second Street, Allegheny, and some of these other streets when you would do them at whatever point in the future.
Correct.
They're not planned right now, but
correct. So that whole concept is streetscaping, and you see so many communities put trees in those 5-foot square grates, and they're all dead. So, I mean, I think that's probably very important to have some kind of shrub or trees or something, greenery, but I don't know. I mean, so that I think needs to be a part of this conversation. And then the lighting, of course, as well.
Yep.
Tony can speak to that about the fallen down ones that we have now. But yeah,
I can say we know how to do those tree grates better now than we did in the past. So they're a little more successful these days, but yeah, we'll definitely look at that.
That too, and Brian, the bigger flower plots are kind of coming into play too and looking pretty nice too. So I've kind of checked out Lake City and Red Wing over the last year, and not that we got neither one of their money to spend, but there's a lot of stuff out there to think about.
Yep. So, lots of options. And that's what the public involvement process will be. It will be, here's a range of options and different styles and things that we can do. What does the public like? What do you like to see? And, we have these open houses where they'll put, stickers on things that they like, and they can vote on things and all those types of things. And then ultimately you make a decision as a council on what you want to do based on that public feedback. But we really want to zero in on what you really want to include in that. What do you want to ask people? What area do you want to include, and what types of things do you want to ask for input on?
And then finally, my other comment would be wayfinding. I think that's really critical. Those would be the items I'd like to see included.
Yeah, and I was just going to say that too, wayfinding, because prior to moving down to Main Street, I was answering a lot of questions, but now I got people coming in my door. They think I'm a restaurant or something. So I think wayfinding is a very big priority. I would like to see really solid lights, because I know in the past we've tried to hang flowers and stuff and we couldn't do it because our aluminum lights that are hollow. I would like to see something that we can put decorations on, Christmas decorations, and not have them tip over.
Yeah, they've got some pretty nice lighting systems now with track systems on there where you can add things to hang whatever you want on there, and they're structurally set up for that. So yeah.
I even like the lighting system that some cities have where they have speakers. For instance, during Christmas under the bridge, we could have a few light poles with speakers on them or something. I don't know. And that's all.
There's a lot of things you can do with street lighting now. They call it smart street lighting. You can have it adjust lighting levels during the time of day. You can put, Wi-Fi hotspots on them. You could security cameras, all kinds of things. They're just a hub for technology. So.
Awesome. Anybody else? Yeah, go ahead, Brian. I have a couple that I don't think were highlighted, but I don't want to.
Okay, go ahead. You might catch them. If you don't,
Okay,
I'll
so
mention ones I heard.
I hadn't thought of some of this stuff until Caroline and I had a conversation. So thanks, Caroline, for prompting me. I tend to think like manageable, like these manageable chunks, and this scope of this is like, it's pretty big. So I didn't want to go much beyond it, but thinking about it more, restrooms, we've talked about more of it, the public availability of restrooms, and we've kind of determined that I think this property adjacent to the Speedlings is not an ideal spot for a restroom. But I did wonder about the parcel that Jeff mentioned. Maybe it's not a zero sum thing. Maybe there's a restroom and other use. There was, for a good long while, there was a play structure on that parcel as well. So in terms of sort of low cost development, if you want to call it that, that was a very effective use of that parcel. It was used all the time by residents and visitors. EV has come up over and over again. So I'm sort of channeling the public's interest there. Where does it make sense? When we talked about it with the Eagle Center, they said it doesn't need to be close to the Eagle Center. It probably doesn't make sense for it to be right at one of those public spots because we don't want people there long term. But if there's a space for it in these, to the parking under the bridge or the other lot over by the library, everybody said wayfinding. I'd like to see wayfinding incorporate, where to find parking, how to find our trails, our parks, our services, our marina, our business district, our historic business district, that kind of thing. Landscaping, there's a couple of residents have brought to our attention, like think parcels that don't get mowed, or if they get mowed, they don't grow. And I wondered if there's some lower maintenance perennial, very low maintenance perennial possibilities there. Like John said, not necessarily trees, not trees, but also some other low maintenance landscaping. We had a large, beautiful perennial bed that was maintained by a volunteer for many, many years. It's adjacent to the open space that will not be that anymore. So I think that'll feel like a loss for a lot of people because it was beautiful year round. Pedestrian connectivity to the riverfront. I really hadn't thought about that as a pedestrian. I find that to be very connected because I can bike and walk, but for people who have assistive devices, I think that really hadn't registered until Caroline brought that to my attention. So yeah, that is an area where suddenly you're right up with the cars again. I really want to think about maintenance and sustainability, not just about energy efficiency, but like, we don't want to be doing this over and over again. So every time I see pavers, I always think, are pavers necessary? Or is in this day and age, is colored stamped concrete just as beautiful, if not more beautiful? So I think, thinking about the sustainability, looking forward and what the best materials are for that, so that we don't sort of like return to old things that we've done that haven't been very, very maintainable. Lawrence Boulevard, I think that's worth talking about. There's a lot of private investment in sort of plantings and things that if we did add trail facility there, we'd have to think about, are we willing to add back flowers and trees? Because right now the adjacent property owners are doing a lot of gardening on those boulevards. Signage, broadly speaking, when we did the Greater Minnesota Futures Project, I sort of envisioned signage at the bottom of the bridge when you come across, and also in other areas. So if we think about signage, especially kind of an identity system like Welcome to Wabasha, so sort of replacing the gray latticed ones that are currently in place at the Trunk Highway and then also by the American, thinking about what does Welcome to Wabasha look like at the major points of entry to our community. So not to say that they would all be placed as a part of this, but if we're developing identity systems and wayfinding that makes sense for downtown. How does it relate to a larger, the larger kind of brand identity? I think everything else has been said. In terms of who to involve, you know, the Heritage Preservation Commission has the challenging task of having to approve all of these because the district includes, you know, a large portion of this. And so in terms of getting the public's input, I would love it if there could be some level of involvement of the HPC so that we don't put things in front of the public that are going to be difficult for the HPC to find in keeping with the Secretary of Interior standards. It's wide open for interpretation, but we still are obligated to do that and go through the due process. So I've looked at some of the improvements in other cities, and it's like they just added kind of this array of, there's just a spectacle of kind of beautification. And I think sometimes it detracts from their actual, the beauty of their actual buildings and their whatever it is their other assets are. So just kind of, you know, withdrawing from the idea that we have to just add and add and add and add and add, but thinking about what is necessary and really complements our existing assets. And then of course the involvement of Main Street, because right now they're pulling off the beautification role. And of course the decorations committee, the Septoberfest people who live they live the life of actually making the streets beautiful right now. So certainly wanting to involve them because they have had input along the way. And I'm sure have desires long-term. And yeah, schedule of construction. I thought that was a really good suggestion, as well as the maintenance during the actual project, the accessibility during the project, in terms of the accessibility to business, not just can I even get to that building, but can somebody in a scooter or wheelchair or walker get into their insurance agent, et cetera. And yeah, the issue of trees, you know, do trees make sense? I don't even know. I've gone to a lot of tree workshops at Main Street conferences, and I, you know, recognize what Brian's saying about improvements in sort of tree science and how much soil they need and don't need and stuff. But, you know, have our boulevards, our commercial boulevards in our historic district ever successfully had trees? And if they haven't, are there other avenues to adding greenery? Because if trees make sense, great. If trees don't make sense, you know, that might be also worth considering. I think that's all I had. Oh, the connection to Beach Park, as you mentioned, Brian, I know that came up in the vision, and there've been some modified, you know, less grandiose. I think there was issues of like, you know, large eagle statues and things to sort of draw people down to the park. And I don't think that that's necessary. I think really small street improvements can actually help with that. You know, that's an area where it's a beautiful shady walk down the Beach Park, but the sidewalks aren't in very good condition. And you don't know that that park is on the other end of that street if you don't already know that it's there. So that's it for me. Thank you for this. Exciting to think about.
So so I took a lot of notes here, and I think I have a good handle on what you want to include. The one thing that I wasn't clear about, was there any desire to look at pedestrian connectivity between basically where the trail ends at this end of Lawrence Boulevard, trying to carry something through over to Hiawatha, or is that not on anybody's list that you want to dive into?
That's definitely on my radar. You know, we've talked about this for safe routes to schools. It's kind of the broader kind of reason for calling that out, that crossing across Hiawatha being a tough one for, you know, for even an avid biker kid, you know, walker, biker. So yeah, I didn't think of it as it related to this street project, but if it relates to signage, I think we've been talking about it as it relates to kind of safety considerations that we might need to make, but maybe it does relate to signage or lighting. I hadn't given that any thought until you mentioned it, honestly.
And obviously that's something that is outside the scope of the construction of this project. But again, if you're going to be talking about these types of things and doing public involvement to try to plan for it and develop a vision for what the community wants for that, now might be the time to do it.
Yeah.
It's like I said, it's come up in a lot of conversations that I've heard in surveys of more access and connectivity to the river, but we never really dig down and ask, well, what does that mean to somebody? Is it, you know, Jared Shealy had the vision, like, I just want to like fish, you know, I think that off a dock, is that going to be accomplished already with the Eagle Center project? Or I think it's worth asking people about, but I don't know. I've heard it as a desire, but not specifically what people are envisioning, what they mean by that.
Okay.
Brian, I got a question.
Yep.
Are you looking for direction tonight, or are you going to come back next meeting with the cost for the downtown study and then the cost for the additional.
Yep, I think that, yeah, basically, I wanted to get the laundry list, and then we'll try to package up the laundry list into some, basically little pieces that make sense. Okay, to look at this part is gonna be this, to look at that, to include this. I don't know how many parts there'll be. I gotta wrap my arms around this a little bit with staff. But yeah, we'll come back next meeting with kind of a menu of choices for you to look at and what it would cost to add that level of planning and public involvement for those pieces to the project, so you know.
Ryan, I got a question for you. This is Dean. Say on the curb cuts that you're planning on putting in, are they going to be similar to the ones that we have now, or are they going to be the ones where you have essentially two on each corner, one to cross the main street and one to cross the other street?
Well, okay, so DOT guidelines and ADA guidelines now, the preference is to do directional ramps, so individual ones for each crossing.
And that's what I prefer.
Yeah. What I would say about that.
I'll tell you why I prefer that. For instance, this winter, I have not been able to get around this town because the curb cuts are not cleaned out. But some of the other ones, newer ones, are. At least one out of the two is cleaned out. And I think it's important that we look at accessibility in the city and welcome it rather than look away from it.
The putting in the curb bump outs will help us to do that from a design standpoint. It gives us more space to do that. So yeah, that's usually the focus of the design, is to try to get separate curb ramps, directional curb ramps in, instead of the kind of the fan ones that just kind of fan out all directions from the corner. So yeah, we'll look at that during design.
I would imagine that with the bump outs and the dual passage like you're talking about for the ramps, city staff would probably most likely be cleaning them out instead of the property owners like it is now. You ever get that question, Brian? Or
We always get the question on who's going to move the snow.
Yeah.
And always deflect it to public works staff and say, I don't know.
Well, I know right now it's a property owner, and that's probably, after everybody gets around plowing and stuff, that's probably the last thing they think about is cleaning them one additional time. But
Yep. Well, and the curb bump outs give you a little more space for snow storage too. So I know there's a lot of advantages to them. Usually the only detraction we hear from them is what Craig brought up. I mean, it's a design issue. We do have to accommodate commercial vehicles and turning movements and that type of thing. So we can design around that. But then the other issues, usually the guys driving the snowplows don't like them because it's an impediment, right? So,
yeah.
But okay, well, I think I have the direction I needed for this. So thank you for your feedback, and we'll come back to you in February with a menu of choices for you.
Super. Thanks for being with us, and good night. Surely don't need you to hang on with us. We really appreciate your time. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. All right. And thanks everybody for that feedback. We have our franchise fee ordinance in front of us. Same detail as was presented before is in the packet. Did you have any overview, Caroline, that you want us to consider? Or shall we just open it up for motion and discussion?
Yeah, I would just, I will review everything there if council desires it, but I did review that in December. And we are in an hour into the meeting. But I will say that here's a few questions I got from your colleagues. One question was, it's an estimated $76,000 of annual revenue. Where did that estimate come from? Is it guaranteed? And let's say we go through all of this and it's only 46,000. Can we get out of this? And Ross from Xcel Energy is on the line, but he said, well, it's an estimate, as long as people are paying their utility bills. That's going to be pretty close to, they would stand behind that number of what we're going to be collecting. And he said that it is also easy to undo the franchise fee. I mean, not terribly easy, but it's not that you're locked in. We can recall it. In fact, the council did do that back in 2013. It would probably be some effort on the staff part, but it's not that you're locked into it. And then another question we got was, you know, does Xcel Energy collect any of this fee? Do they make any money? And they don't. 100% of the proceeds get sent to the city of Wabasha. And I just kind of an educated guess is it must be something that is allowed in Minnesota and maybe was put in place as an additional opportunity for cities to collect revenue, because we don't have it across. We didn't have it at my prior city in La Crosse, Wisconsin, and we also had Xcel Energy. It definitely seems to be unique to Minnesota as a way to generate additional local funds. So they don't make any more money collecting it, but they do the work for us. And then they would send us a quarterly check. So from kind of one of the benefits or why we're discussing it is from our perspective, you know, a counter example is the lodging tax. The lodging tax is extremely time consuming for the city to collect, and we only keep, I think it's 5% of those revenues. So that's a fee or a tax that costs a lot of money for the city to administer. Trying to track it, there's no way to enforce it. Whereas this is a tax that we don't have to administer and we get sent the check, which is actually our relationship on the lodging tax. I've been doing a lot of thinking about the lodging tax because we collect it, but then send the check to somebody else. But we keep 5%, and in this case, Xcel would not. So those are some of the questions that came up in advance of the meeting. And Craig also noted that I had a mathematical error. So the annual revenue that residents would be charged on a home would be $36 a year, not $26 a year. And the other error was for a larger business. It's, I forget which one it is. I think I had 260, it's actually 240, but that has been corrected now in the PowerPoint and in the notes. And I thank Craig for pointing that out in advance of the meeting, so there was no confusion there.
Thanks for that. Anybody have additional questions that we could entertain a motion and a second and a discussion as well?
So we need a motion to adopt the franchise fee. Do we need one to adopt it? Is it gas and electric or individual separately, or how do you want to do it?
The resolution is here for us and it reads.
It says resolution designated funds for capital
Improvement Fund. Okay, so good question, John. So do we need it to be for both or individual? Do you know that, Caroline?
Or doesn't matter?
I don't think that I'm hearing from anyone. I think if it's either both of them or none is what I'm hearing. So I think we could adopt both, but they are technically, you know, different ordinances there.
I'll move to adopt the gas and electric franchise fee through Xcel Energy.
We have a first from John Friedmeier. Do we have a second?
Second, Moyer.
We have a second from Dean Moyer. Any further discussion or questions?
I just wanted to add, I did get some feedback from some people saying it's just another way to tax us. And while that's absolutely true, the reason I'm in favor for this is because if this money wasn't collected this way, it would be collected straight through the levy, which the taxpayers, the full burden would be on them. In this way, we get to distribute this to people who are tax exempt in town, and there's a list in the PowerPoint. And so that's why I'm in favor of it.
Thanks for that, Brian. Any other comments?
Not only those who are tax exempt, but those like me who rent and don't pay property tax. So I will be paying this fee every month, and there's 300 plus other renters in Wabasha that will be paying this fee. So I don't mind it as a renter, putting my money back into the city coffers.
Thanks, Dean. Anything further? Hearing no further comment, we.
Wait a minute.
Yep.
Yeah,
Oh, Jeff?
can we go ahead and add the resolution designating the funds for capital improvement to the original motion?
Yeah, we can. I thought we'd do that as a separate one, but we can, I'll certainly add that. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So we would go ahead and amend your motion,
I'd
John.
amend the motion to adopt the gas and electric franchise fee and the resolution designate the funds from those fees to go to capital improvement plan.
We have a first from John Friedmeier. Do we have a second?
Second
you,
from Moyer.
We have a second from Dean Moyer. Any further discussion?
I would just add, I got a chat note from Ross that we also need to accept the agreements, but that could also be a motion after this one.
Okay. All right, so we have that motion on the floor and we have a second. Hearing no further discussion.
Fellow,
All right, we'll have a roll.
Fellow,
Yes.
Woodley,
Yes.
Walrick,
No.
Friedmeier,
Yes.
Falcom,
Yes.
Moyer,
Yes.
Durant.
Yes. All right, motion prevails. So that is the first action. So I'm hearing now we need to approve the agreements by resolution. Is that what is that what we need to do, Caroline? I think you're still muted.
Wendy, do you have any thoughts on that? I think,
or do we need to take future action on those agreements if we don't have them?
the agreements, it's odd. The agreement is there in the form of the ordinance, which is a little confusing, but it is the way that we did our former franchise fee. But Wendy, can they adopt this, or do we need to bring it back? This is what we have. It's an ordinance, but it's also an agreement. And it's the format that Excel provided us of what they use. So
I think we can adopt it. Are you good? Okay. We had conversations with Excel and their attorney was online with it. And items that were brought up, Brian Mullen brought up items that he was looking to change and they didn't, so.
Okay, so we do not need further action. We can adopt this particular ordinance.
So, Honorable Mayor and Council, can I just?
Hi, Ross. Nice to see you.
Yeah, good evening. Good evening. Yeah, so currently there are franchise agreements in place currently with Wabasha. Those are the non-franchise fee agreements. So if you're going to move to a fee ordinance, which sounds like you just adapted, we do need acceptance of the new franchise agreements, which also list those fees within them. So it's just basically accepting the new franchise agreements for both gas and electric, in addition to those fee ordinances with gas and electric tied to them. I don't know if I made it any clearer or not, but
I'm
yeah.
trying to follow along. I'm trying not to be the slow one in the group, but I think that's what we have in front of us, right? We have a resolution which has the fees listed.
Yeah, so typically what I see from our communities, they adopt the franchise agreements.
Okay.
Have a separate ordinance, which was what I provided you with the fees listed in them. So there's really kind of four documents: the two franchise agreements and the fee ordinances. In the franchise agreement, the fees are listed in there, but it's a separate ordinance that lists how the franchise fees will be paid.
Okay. Is it imperative that we act on that tonight, or do we need to work that out for?
Well, you can't implement a fee unless the new franchise agreements are also approved.
Right. Completely understand that.
Right.
Ross, can you see that what we have uploaded here, is that
Yeah.
the agreement you're referring to?
Yes, that's correct. Those are the
Okay.
agreements that would need to be approved.
Okay.
Yep,
So we
Okay,
can have a motion to approve that agreement, is what you're saying.
correct.
I got
Can we call it what it is? You have an electric franchise ordinance and then you have a gas franchise ordinance. Is that what we're going to be approving?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay, let's just call it what that is. That's the title on it.
Thank you. That's what we'll do. So we have those links. If you return to your agenda packet, they're the first two links at the bottom of this item. So do we have a motion? And I don't know if we want to do these separately. I think we can have a motion to adopt the electric franchise ordinance and the gas franchise ordinance, if anybody feels comfortable making that motion.
I'll make that.
Moved by Moyer.
I think I heard Craig first, very quickly echoed by Dean Moyer. So we have a first from Craig Falcom, second from Dean Moyer. Any further discussion or comment, just so we're sure we're doing the sufficient approvals? All right, hearing none, we'll take a vote by roll.
Ulrich,
No.
Sella,
Yes.
Welcome,
Yes,
Moyer,
Yes.
Friedmeier,
Yes.
Woodley,
Yeah.
Durant.
Yes. Okay, finally, we are at general business 4. I'm sure the Speedlings have been very intrigued by all of our agenda to date, or to this point, but we're very happy to be able to address this with you. We did, as Jean pointed out, have a thorough discussion of this on our December meeting. Thanks for being there for that as well. And so in summary, in 2019, the city of Wabasha tore down the building on 137 Pembroke. It was formerly called the Finchy Building. It was a clapboard structure. It had fallen into disrepair. So SVJ Creative Designs has purchased the adjacent property. I was really excited to see your inventory in the window. I didn't know that was going to happen so quickly. Formerly Passy Electric at 131 Pembroke. So they're wishing to know if the city of Wabasha would consider selling them the parcel so they could display their products outside with fencing. They had a attached document for our review in the prior meeting to sort of illustrate what that would be like. We have an attached market analysis. The average lot sale was $24,000. In the opinion of the author of the analysis, the appraised value is $10,000 to $15,000. And as Dean pointed out, there does appear to have been a past practice of prioritizing an offer to an adjacent property owner. With that, anything further for us from staff?
Just that, I think we weren't sure if this, market analysis was gonna come back in time, and so it did come back. The author, the average lot sale was 24,000, but this is a much smaller parcel, so the author gave me the opinion of 10 to 15,000, probably leaning more on the $10,000 figure as a final figure. So I think I have it as an update, but if we want to start negotiations with that dollar amount, that was kind of the direction I was given before. In terms of asking legal counsel about this question, I'm really certain we can do it. We did not ask that question again. We didn't think it would be on the agenda. But we could confirm that, but I'm pretty confident that given that we have an appraised value and it's the adjacent parcel owner, I'm not concerned that we need to market this lot out there in the public, but we could kind of do that as part of a confirmation process as we move forward.
Great, thanks. Okay, so we don't have action before us, but certainly maybe you want some input from council.
Yeah, just if maybe input about if we proceed with negotiations and then, looking at, depending on how those goes, maybe approving an offer to purchase in February from the Speedlings.
Okay. Any input for staff as they pursue what's, if you desire for the staff to pursue what's proposed, please voice that.
I'm
I think
also
we
okay with
should-
this, so, yes, please, go ahead and negotiate with them, and, I would say 10,000 is a good amount.
Thanks, Dean. Jeff, I think that was you.
I'd like to see getting 15,000. I think we paid 15,000 to demolish the property.
Anybody else? Any criteria for staff to work with in the negotiation?
If staff can just move forward with the negotiations, that'd be great. I appreciate Jeff's comments, but I think we're probably more realistic at 10,000.
Yeah, I support this too. I was just so pleased to learn of this particular sort of, it's sort of to have a building owner that can use that adjacent parcel. I think we're fortunate for that. I love that little building. Lots of people probably thought I was crazy. We went thoroughly through every option we thought existed to rehabilitate it. And one of the considerations that came up was, and the sort of the unofficial opinion of several contractors that looked at it was, yeah, it's too bad you can't rehabilitate it, because if you can't save it, it's very unlikely you can build on it. So to have an adjacent property owner who can think of a good purposeful use that adds vibrancy to the streetscape I never would have imagined it. So that's great. Thanks for all the work to date. And we look forward to having something in February, hopefully. All right. Thank you, Speedlings. Okay, I'm going to try to get back to my so sluggish sometimes. There we go. So that brings us to the formation of an ad hoc personnel committee. Caroline's probably best if you give this overview. I know it's been a little bit complicated and you're probably in the best position to make it as simple as possible.
Yep, so I'm just pulling up my memo that I can read, and then I will share my screen here. So I'm just hoping to get 3 council members who will set on an ad hoc personnel committee. On November 17th, Administrator Plant informed me that in the event that Wabasha County had imposed vaccination and testing requirements on its employees, they would require all lessees of the space to adopt the same county vaccination or test policy. This policy requires all individuals who are not vaccinated or who do not wish to share vaccination status to test weekly and wear a mask while in the CJC. Administrator Plant indicated this could be done under Article 16 of the lease agreement with Wabasha County. Well, I guess I don't know if you guys want to go into all the details, but I guess I'll keep summarizing. So anyways, and then this was voted on by the Health and Human Services Committee on November 16th, that they were going to impose these regulations on the city as its tenant of the CJC. And then I was informed that this was put on hold because it was subject to litigation. And then on December 22nd, it was Wabasha County is informed that it was again in place. On December 30th, I was informed that the county would be adopting this policy, and then that the city was again expected to impose the county policy on its employees. I consulted with some attorneys yesterday who informed me that the county could do this under the lease terms. And furthermore, there was a 120-day lease termination with or without cause in the lease. They also confirmed, though, that the county is not required to impose these regulations on the city. And I told the county administrator this, and he confirmed that his committee is aware of this and understands that this is the case, but they wanted to do this for fairness to the other employees occupying the building. And then I did receive details as of a few hours ago of the details of the policies. It's essentially what I've outlined here. And as to whether or not the county would consider additional flexibility. And what has been restated to me is that the city is expected to apply to its employees the OSHA standards given to 100+ employee companies, even though we are under 100. So as we consider the implications of this would require a notice to the union. It would require staff time to create the policy. there'd be cost to testing individuals. And then, we'd be expected to enforce the policy. So this is not going to be, a fun ad hoc committee, but I think just because of what's on the table, I'm looking for advice in a smaller setting, that we could have a smaller group provide advice as to how we are going to act. But I've been informed today that at a minimum on Monday, the rules going in place for the CGC is that anyone who is not vaccinated has to wear a mask. So it is my intent to, on that item alone, I'm going to, and I will have to inform our employees that this is the policy of that building, to wear a mask on Monday if you're not vaccinated. But in terms of the details of testing, there is more time to implement that. So I'd like this group to hopefully meet this week to decide how we want to move forward.
I'll volunteer, Caroline.
Thank you, Brian.
I'll sit in too if you need me.
Okay, I think we need 3, so.
You Caroline, you can include me as well.
Okay. Okay, I think we've got our 3, Mayor Durand.
Terrific. Thank you all so much. You guys will make a great committee. I'm willing. I have a very small, small business kind of mindset about this, but I think those who have participated have got that and the larger organization perspective. So I really appreciate the representation. Thanks very much. And thanks for soldiering on this. Both, I know Joe and Caroline have had to put a lot of time in to understand what they're suggesting and kind of understand what their policy recommendations look like in light of the actual, OSHA guidance, which I don't even know if it's established yet. I mean, there's just everything in this whole equation is a moving part, the availability of tests, et cetera. So it's a puzzle, but I appreciate everybody's involvement. Thank you. So that formation, do we need to approve that formally, or just that buy-in is, that willingness is sufficient? I think so. Okay. For formal action would come to us in the future. Okay, so the donations, we always have.
Mayor Durand, we have to do the council.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We need a council president. I shouldn't have waited until everybody was so tired. Do we have any nominations for a council president for 2022? Brian has served very capably in the role.
I nominate Craig.
We have a nomination for Craig. Do we have a second? Craig's not seconding himself, but John is. Great. We have a nomination by Dean Moyer, a first for Dean, with Dean's nomination, a second with John's. And do we have any further discussion? Craig, any comments? Would you be willing? Great. I see him nodding his head. He's not, as you can see, he's not going on the record saying he's willing.
Yes, I'd be willing.
Great. Okay, we have Craig's acknowledgement of that nomination. Do we have any further discussion? All right, we'll take a roll vote. Thanks for being willing, Craig.
Walrick,
Yes.
Sella,
Yes.
Falcom,
Yes.
Moyer,
Yes.
Woodley,
Yes.
Friedmeier,
Yes.
Durand.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. President. All right, very good. We appreciate that. Thanks for reminding me, Tyler. And now we have the donations. Always some very generous donations at the end of the year. And this year's no different. So to the library, $400 in memory of Judy McNallen by Beth and Greg Koning and family. $3,000 from Don Yarlick, which I think was covered beautifully in the Wabasha Herald. $1,000 from Linda Tenney, $100 from Pat and Tom Haskett, and $200 from an anonymous donor. Do we have a motion to approve and accept the donations?
I'll move.
Thank you, Tim.
Second.
We have a second from Jeff. Any further discussion, or we'll vote by roll?
Woodley,
Yes.
Friedmeier,
Yes.
Walrick,
Yes.
Sella,
Yes.
Moyer,
Yes.
Falcom,
Yes.
Durand.
Yes, thank you to those donors. We really appreciate that. Any other announcements before we entertain a motion to adjourn? A lot going on. We turned the page in the new year and all the stuff we were working on is right there in front of us. So thanks everybody for everything. If we don't have any further announcements, we can have a motion to adjourn.
I move.
Thank you, Tim.
Second.
I heard two, but I heard John, I saw John's mouth moving. We have a first from Tim Wallerick, a second from John Friedmeier. Any further discussion? We'll vote by roll.
Friedmeier,
Yes.
Walrick,
Yes.
Moyer,
Yes.
Sella,
Yes.
Woodley, Woodley,
Coming.
There we go. Yes.
Falcom,
Yes.
Duran.
Yes. Thank you, everybody. Happy New Year. Happy 2022. See you soon. Good night.
Night.